At the very same time, something is happening to non-humans such as poems, books and prose, paint and stone. In 1790 it was possible to see prose as a special kind of poetry with very long lines, lines that have to be right justified and called paragraphs, but by 1900, that magic date again, poetry had become a little island of consistency in a giant ocean of prose, and now it's even possible to see prose narrative as a part of an even larger configuration space of games and gaming, fully including the human in the object, the move from reader as passive spectator to reader as participant, observer, naturalism, to player. Monet had started painting water lilies, or rather he had started to paint the space in which water lilies float, or rather he had started to paint the rippling, reflective object in which the lilies float, the water. Just as Einstein discovered a rippling, flowing space-time where previously objects had just floated in a void, Monet discovers the sensuous spaciousness of the canvas itself, just as later Tarkovsky was to discover the sensuous material of film stock. All this had been prefigured in the Romantic period with the development of blank verse narratives, meandering through autobiographical detours. Suddenly, a whole lot more paper was involved. Proust took this discovery to its wonderful logical conclusion. Jackson Pollock took it to another conclusion. Paint and brushes and drips started to set themselves free from the inner space whose representation they were supposed to be, in some ironic, half-veiled way. Huge resonant sound waves began to escape from the composer's dreams into the performance space and beyond on radio signals and in MP3s. Yves Klein blue, a colour whose chemical components killed their inventor, spread itself across canvases with the help of naked human bodies. It's hard to discern exactly when it happened, though with 2020 hindsight and some insights into the ontological priority of objects, we can begin to see it everywhere. Non-humans stopped speaking about the human failure to access them. The evanescent mist that Hegel identified as the modern human state of style of subjectivity just evaporated, leaving objects behind like crystals in a solution. All of a sudden, it was the time of hyperobjects, phase 4. Ecological. This time is very like phase 1. Objects now exceed the human again, but with the lack of a reverse gear. This is not because we have suddenly stopped knowing things. We have a phase 3 sense of irony. Human knowing is stratospheric, yet object withdrawal from access, including the object we call ourselves, is abyssal at one and the same time. Irony now means not that we have achieved escape velocity from Earth, but that we haven't. Irony now means that we are glued to objects, like a Nancy glued to the tar baby. The more he tries to pull free, the more glued he becomes. It turns out that there is a time after the end of the world, after the conclusion of the film noir of human history, in which we figured out that we are the criminals, a time in which we have entered the uncanny valley, and in which we realize that the valley has no outside. As more and more entities slip into the valley with us, as we come to know them better, the more we find ourselves coexisting with strange strangers. This is what ecological awareness means, not some nice hippie utopia or healthy paradise, but a charnel ground, a bardo, a valley between illusory peaks. In robotics and CGI design, the uncanny valley is a set of appearances of robots and CGI figures that is strange and horrifying for humans. The less like a human the robot seems, the more acceptable it is. Doesn't this explain certain features of racism? Hitler loved his dog Blondie, but spent his time exterminating humans whom he dehumanized, reducing them to lower than dogs. Now, the map of the uncanny valley suggests that beyond the zombie trough, there are healthy persons. The valley slopes back up again. In other words, the uncanny valley diagram itself is racist. Who gets to decide when the slope starts to ascend again? I suggest that by contrast, all entities, humans included, begin to slip into what at first appears to be a valley, but actually turns out to be a very different reality altogether. The other point against the upward slope is that a robot version of your mum is uncanny not because it apes a healthy human,